Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only talk about things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, or mechanics is out, unless it relates directly to the way the story is being told. I'm Daniel Radford, author, surprisingly talkative victim of decapitation, and also your host. And as is the norm, I'm joined once more by John Kernan as we continue our themed cycle on sequels and spin-offs.
Hello, I really like throwing axes and hammers. It's cool.
And as always, if that was not enough of a hint for you, especially going off of some of the things we discussed in the previous episode, fittingly enough, this is also somewhat of a sequel as we are officially going to start talking about the God of War franchise, specifically the Nordic duology.
Yeah, oh man, they're so good and I'm just always a sucker. Throwing stuff is cool, but the real reason I say axes and hammers is just it doesn't matter which version of Thor it is, but it's so nice that we get it here with Kratos' axe and the player character too. God, something about being able to throw something and then just from any distance hold your hand up and it will fly back to you no matter where it has to go.
Oh,
It's so cool.
returning weapons always survive.
Yeah,
Although, side note, the spear's take on that also an interesting one. I like that a lot.
dude, as soon as I didn't know how well I remembered some of those Norse myths, but as soon as they said
Sure, yeah.
the ring was Dropnir and then showed like the little extra ring falling out of it, I went, "Oh." And then I
Oh,
was
they're
sitting
gonna
there and I
do
was
some
like,
shit with that.
yeah, and I was sitting and like literally the only thing I could think right away was I was like, well, I can see how that would be a weapon against little douchebag, literal gatekeeper over here.
Uh,
Like if he can see everything coming, then I guess the only thing to do is overwhelm him with literally a quantum, what's the word? I almost want to call it a quantum mistake in weaponry.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if your experiences with Heimdall are basically just the MCU version, you're in for a surprise when you get to Ragnarok's. But before we start getting too down into the cool weapons do cool shit, and Heimdall's a dick.
What a dick.
Such a dick. We might as well
Everyone keeps
discuss
secrets.
some stuff about the game themselves because I think Ragnarok
Sometimes it's the only way to
and
protect
well,
the
the
ones
God
we
of War,
love.
God of War duality are an interesting choice for this episode, right? Because
I know
Ragnarok is, of course, a sequel to God of War
God
2018.
killer.
However,
Yeah, it is in fact a.
What is it you want from me?
I think technically it's still a direct
it a God of
sequel, although
War
the word
you came
direct
to
feels
find?
weird because it has been a. It is such a long time and so far
don't really
away
want war.
from the others.
but yes,
Do you,
but
Kratos?
the whole duology is
All that blood
also a
on your
direct
hands,
sequel to the
your
original
son's
God of War
hands.
games, which I think were all on the
What is it you
PS2
will not
even,
tell me?
right?
I can't talk
Yeah.
about it. But I just
That's
need
how
you to
long
trust
it's
me.
been.
We
Oh
follow
wait,
you on
I
every
think the
whim.
last.
And you don't believe in
I think
any of
3
it.
was
And
on the
still I
PS3 or
follow.
something, but
Either way.
mostly
All that matters
mostly
is that you are
PS2,
safe.
a couple
But
of
that's not all that
PSP,
matters.
side
Who's keeping
games.
you safe?
For those of you who
Do not
don't know,
need
a
to
very
protect me.
brief recap because
Sure
it's
about
a
that?
very sprawling story
Pretender
at this
God!
point, and these most recent games are long
the
and
old
often
Death can have me.
For those of you who are unfamiliar of which I also was quite substantial after this looking into it for this episode as well.
What do you even
Basically,
know
there's this guy,
of
Greg.
God's word?
He was a sort of
In
general
your
in
lifetimes, has
Sparta
anyone
in good old
ever
fashioned
worshipped
Spartan
you?
times. Ancient Greece,
Ever prayed
you
to
know,
you?
And he was in a
Can
battle
you
that
even
wasn't
imagine that
going
kind of
well.
love? No!
And he was like, hey, Ares,
You don't care
smite
about
my
anything
enemies.
beyond
Give me the
yourself.
power to smite my enemies. And Ares
Not the
was
monster
like, all right.
who kills
and he
without
did that.
cause.
Unfortunately, there was some strings attached, like driving him crazy, burning his arms, inadvertently making his wife out of the entire thing. What was that?
Including his own wife and daughter.
Yeah.
turning him into just basically a mindless berserker.
Yeah, so at that point, Kratos was justifiably pissed and decided to take this out on Greece.
Let's not
What
just
is
forget that
necessary.
despite Ares directly making him do it, Kratos was
Because it
also
is written.
still Greek tragically punished for the killing of his wife and daughter by having their ashes permanently, completely coat his skin.
We'll make our
And
own
that's why
destiny.
he's so pale. Kratos isn't that white. That's his first wife and daughter's ashes all over his skin.
Yeah, he is, yikes, justifiably angry. Sets out in a quest to murder Ares, successfully does that, becomes the god of war, and that whole mess just spirals into chaos where he ends up taking out basically the entire Greek pantheon, especially when he finds out that he's actually a demigod son of Zeus, because of course he is. That's the original God of War trilogy in a nutshell. Is made to kill his family, gets angry, and murders basically the entire Greek pantheon in response. Then we
Oh.
move ahead.
To interrupt for a second, slightly more TLDR about the old God of Wars. There are multiple times over the course of the series where Kratos either tries to do individual good things or he tries to settle down and just accept how his life is. And every single time he does, someone else either starts acting up or betrays him again or comes after him for vengeance over something he's already done in his journey, and he just keeps getting pulled back into fighting, keep getting pulled back into war and violence and vengeance until eventually everybody is dead. And not only is the Greek pantheon dead, but since they are the avatars of the primal forces of nature in that land, the entire land of Greece and Rome and that entire chunk of the world is just dead. Its nature doesn't work anymore. It's covered in constant storms, earthquakes, tidal waves. It no longer exists.
Yeah, sucks to be them. Couldn't imagine a story doing something terrible to that part of the world.
No, who would ever do that? That's crazy.
But yeah, so basically, he is just in a perpetual cycle of violence until he kills everyone and fucks off to a different part of the world. And that's
He
essentially...
literally fucked off to an entire pantheon.
Yeah, which is basically where God of War 2018 comes in, the beginning of this Nordic duology. It's some time later. We don't know exactly how far ahead of time it is, because, I mean, he's a demigod, so he doesn't age the same anyway.
He's not just a demigod. He ascended, so
True,
he is
'cause
just
he was a
full-fledged
full
god.
He's like a god and a half.
Yeah, kinda.
He has moved to Scandinavia and managed to find a degree of peace and settle down with his new wife he meets there, Lorfei. And they have a son, Atreus. And we pick up at the beginning of this trilogy where Lorfei has just died from some disease or something. And
Everyone
he
keeps
and
secrets.
Atreus set off on this journey to spread her ashes from the highest peak in all the realms. If
Sometimes
you remember,
it's the only
of
way to
course,
protect
in
the ones we
mythology,
love.
you know, there are 9 realms, different like dimensions or and our reality is what they would call Midgar. Unfortunately, they eventually discovered the highest peak in all the realms is not in Midgar, it's in your
God,
the land of the
killer.
giants.
Which I guess makes sense. Perhaps the land
is it
of
you
the
want from
giants
me?
would have the tallest bank.
Is it a god of war?
Although,
you
as
came
they
to
keep
find?
telling us, not all giants are giants, but some of them definitely
You
are.
really want war?
I kind of love the revelation that's like, yeah,
Give me a
some giants
Kratos.
are just giants. Most of them are
All
just
that
really
blood
magical.
on your hands.
And coincidentally,
son's hands.
most of the ones that are magical can be
But
giant
you will not
or
tell
not.
me.
Depends on the
I
moment
can't
you
talk
look
about
at
it.
Anyway,
But I just need you to
basically,
trust
whilst
me.
they're trying to do this,
We
they are
follow you
perpetually
everywhere.
set upon
But you don't
by
believe in any of
Volva,
it.
And still,
who
I
has
follow.
been led to believe by Odin
All that
that
matters
they
is
are
that
the
you are
answer to
safe.
his problem.
that's not all
which
that
is
matters.
He has been
Who's keeping you
enchanted
safe?
to be unable to die or feel pain or consequently anything else by
Sure
his
about
mother
that?
Freya, who was terrified of the fact that he was going to die, and basically that was the
Death can
Yeah, for
have me.
anybody who doesn't know,
When it
because
burns me.
I didn't realize until I went out of my way to find a book to listen to the Old Norse
do you
are
even
some of
know
the
of
most
God's
obscure and inconsistent ones despite
your
how
lifetimes
popular
has
it is as
anyone
a mythology.
ever
To
worshipped you?
paraphrase OST,
Ever
we
prayed
believe
to
that
you?
for some reason, despite having
Can
a
you
writing
even
system,
imagine
they
that
did
kind
not
of
write
love?
any of
No.
this shit. So we've
don't
only
care
got
about
like
anything beyond yourself.
bastardized, very anglicized
Beyond the
accounts of
monster
these things,
who
or
kills
Christianized
without
accounts of a lot of their
cause.
myths. That could be like retranslated to as close to the original form as we can.
But TLDR, half because it was foretold that when Baldur died, Ragnarok would begin, and half because she is just an overprotective
only
mother,
bind you if you let
and
it.
Baldur is the only good thing she ever got out of her marriage that she likes even a little bit. Freya went around. I'm sure it was a little bit more of a spell in this mythology, but the classic thing is that Freya
Because it
literally
is
went
written.
around because she could talk to anything, even concepts, and literally asked everything in existence not to hurt Baldur and made everything wrong to hurt Baldur. But she missed.
We'll make our own destiny.
Yeah, in the games, it's portrayed more as like an enchantment or even a curse, but that is more or less what it was like in the original mythology.
Yeah. And then, so this version of Baldur we're presented with is very keen to go after Kratos and Atreus when Odin tells him this, because he has started to feel more and more like it's a curse over the years. He used to have fun with his immortality. He used to do things like have everybody throw weapons and stuff at him for fun, because who cares? It's not gonna
Aim
hurt.
dragons, that sort of shit.
And eventually he started to get really tired of never feeling any sense of danger. He spent so long not being able to feel
Not just
pain
that,
he's
feel anything.
well, I was gonna say, like, I don't even know if he was always unable to feel anything, but even if he wasn't, he got so used to never being able to feel pain that he definitely went numb and stopped feeling anything. If he was already physically numb, then he became emotionally numb too.
Odin basically says, this guy will solve your problem. If you go to, I don't know, fight this war god from another land or whatever, you will learn to feel pain again. You'll be able to feel again. So he's basically, as they're off on their completely unrelated quest to scatter Lawface ashes in Jotunheim, they are constantly beset upon Baldur, who is trying to end his own curse. And there's some other stuff that spins off of that, like Thor's sons Magna and Modi get involved for some reason. I'm not entirely sure. It was Odin set that up too because he's a dick.
Yeah, basically just Odin trying to harass and harangue them because they think they're a threat. The worst part is what he told Baldur ended up being true, but not because Odin thought it was true. He thought he was just lying and manipulating Baldur into getting rid of Kratos and Atreus for him because Baldur can't die. So of course he would murder them. But then well, we'll get into that in a minute. But yeah, and along the way, we're watching all this stuff going. Kratos is definitely not the same guy he was before. He's a much better guy because although Kratos was never evil, and he also was hyper violent and hyper angry. And don't get me wrong, he had very understandable reasons for being who he was, but that doesn't change that who he was wasn't great.
Yeah, he was the protagonist, but he was never a hero.
No, he was never a hero. He hurt a lot of people along the way. A couple times people who didn't deserve it, including killing the boat captain at the very beginning of the first game, only to later, eventually, at one moment in God of War Ragnarok, bring that guy up and just be like, I had no reason to do what I did.
Everyone
And it's
keeps
like, oh.
secrets.
Yeah, I mean, he says at one point, it's basically, I mean, again, I'm paraphrasing the exact quote, but he does say at one point, when he's
Sometimes it's the only
explaining
way to
his
protect
past
the ones
to
we love.
Atreus, he's like, I killed many people who deserved it, and many who did not.
Yeah.
And I'm just, you can't,
I know
a
you-
side note, you can't quote Kratos
God,
without your
killer.
voice dropping at least half an octave.
You have to do
What
your
is it you
best
want from me?
stoic grumble.
Is it
Which,
a god
by
of
the
war
way,
you came
speaking
to
of stoic
find?
grumbles, absolutely love. The Faye's
really want more.
nickname for Kratos was Grumbles.
Come here,
Her
Kratos.
affectionate pet name for him was to just call
All
him
that
Grumbles.
blood on your hands.
But yeah,
On your son's hands.
he's better than he was.
What is it you will not
But
tell me?
he's in
I
the
can't talk
first
about it,
Norse God of
but I
War,
just need you
he's
to trust
still
me.
Not a great
We follow
person.
your every whim.
He's a lot better,
don't
but
believe
he's
in any of
extremely
it.
stoic,
Still, I
quiet,
follow.
and emotionally distant
matters is
because
that you are
although he
safe.
had his connection
that's
with
not all that
Faye and
matters.
he does love
Who's
his
keeping you
son,
safe?
with the way he looks at himself and the kind of person he still sees himself as
Sure
and
about
knowing
that?
who he used to be, nothing terrifies him more than the idea of being a single parent and having
Death can
this
have me
little delicate
loves me.
half-mortal person who he loves is the only thing left in the world that he loves look up to him, who he still sees as a violent, angry piece
What
of
do
shit
you
that can't be
even
trusted with
know
anything.
of
So
God's
that's
word?
basically the gist of the
In your
movie, is
lifetimes,
that
has anyone
it's about
ever worshipped you?
Kratos learning to open up
Ever
and move
prayed
past his
to
past
you?
with regret, like learning to be a dad.
Can you even
Because
imagine
Faye's
that
always
kind of love?
handled
No!
that very important. He's handled
You don't
the
care about
practical
anything
side of
beyond
things
yourself.
largely. He
Beyond
openly
the
admits she was
monster
better if
who
she
kills without
but
cause.
basically he's learning to open up and be a parent to Atreus. Meanwhile, Atreus is his primary function in the story is to force Kratos to open up, but also he is beginning his own path of discovering his own identity, learning
Fate
he is in
only
fact part
binds you
God,
if you let it.
and coming to terms with what that means in the grand scheme of things. And we also have Baldur and Kratos and their own weird, messed up parental dynamic, where
what is necessary.
Kratos in some ways exactly the same as Kratos, in some ways
Not
the
because it
complete
is written.
inverse, when she was entirely too emotionally connected to her child. That all spiraled into a situation where eventually Baldur, after Atreus goes from a bit of an egotistical power
We'll
trip,
make our
killed
own
Moses.
destiny.
Yeah, I want to get into that actually because it is an important thing. I think this is the big spot where we start getting into why I picked God of War and why I say it is like truly a legacy sequel at like almost every single layer of its existence.
Yeah, we're gonna get
Um,
into that.
because like yeah, we'll get into the broader strokes. But I just want to say in this moment as we're going, like this is where it really starts hitting because everything Kratos is going, how he's handling things, who he is now, and how he's trying to treat Atreus is a result of who he used to be and everything that happened in the old trilogy, both as a matter of direct descendants, because Atreus is his son, and also because he's still here. He still remembers it all. He still lived it. He's gonna live ostensibly forever until something kills him. So almost everything we're dealing with is a direct consequence, even with the things he does now, of things he did in the past, one way or another. And the specifically, not just that, but the cycle of violence and pain and toxicity in family lines is everywhere here. It's going on with Kratos and Atreus, Freya and Balder, Magni, Modi, Thor, Sif, Odin, everybody in this entire story who matters. Hell, Brock and Sindri, not directly their ascendants, but they've got their own drama going on with being brothers.
Yeah, I mean, a recurring theme is definitely, especially with parents and children, this idea of, passing on the worst parts of your legacy to them, having to try and move beyond that. But there's just families in general definitely come up and how they influence each other, because of course Freya's got Freya as well, her brother in Ragnarok. Complicated family dynamics and how they can either make or break us is definitely the recurring theme throughout.
Freya's got it from
especially.
every angle,
Yeah.
poor lady. Her horrible, fucked up, abusive husband, her drunken, got hurt, went missing brother she loved so much, and her fucked up dark son who has been manipulated, but also is partially this way because of her mistakes directly.
Largely this way because of her mistakes directly, even.
Well, Odin made it worse every step of the way, but I think that's great because that also makes the theme of this chunk of story also a legacy of the original God of Wars, because God of War was always about the cycle of violence, and this is about the cycle of violence, but this is now literally about the people who have been pulled into and exist in this pre-existing, long-standing cycles of violence and
Everyone
are
keeps
brought into them
secrets.
against their will and not because of anything they did in like Atreus and Baldur and this other a couple
Sometimes
other
it's the only way to
characters.
protect the
To
ones you
close
love.
up basically the plot of God of War 2018 from there. Because you're exactly right, but I want to get through the outlines. We can really delve into
I know you.
thematics and things like that. Essentially,
God,
the whole
killer.
thing with Balder and Freya comes to a climax where Balder is
What is
trying
it you
to
want
kill
from me?
Freya because attacking
Is it a
Kratos
god of
and
war
Atreus
you came
has
to
not been
find?
working, and she's there, and he's angry, and
don't
they're
really
trying
want
to prevent
war.
that because they like Freya, and
Do you,
Freya's like,
Kratos?
no,
Not even because it's not working. He's
All
just
that
so
blood on
emotionally
your hands,
unstable that when she's getting it,
son's
because she's
hands.
directly getting in the way of her fight.
But
Freya
this
is
do not
committed to
tell me.
protecting her son,
I
but
can't talk
also
about it, but I just need you to
considers
trust me.
Kratos and
follow
Atreus
your
friends
every
and
whim.
doesn't want
you don't
to
believe in
just
any
help
of it.
him win
And
either.
still
She's
I
doing
follow.
everything she can to stop him.
All that matters is that you are
She brings a
safe.
dead
But
frost
that's not all that
giant
matters.
back to death.
Who's keeping you safe?
Yeah, she brings
not need
she
you to
she
protect me.
controls his corpse to make him an
Sure
obstacle
about
to
that?
the fight, and it just won't stop.
God!
So between that and his emotional instability, Balder just fucking
Death
just says
can
fuck
happen
it to the fight and is gonna
when
keep
it
fighting to get his revenge.
Kratos and Atreus Kratos kills Balder to prevent this from happening because
What do you
Atreus
even
has managed
know
to stab him
of
with
God's
the head of a missile arrow that was left over.
In your lifetimes, has anyone
Kratos is
ever
practically
worshipped you?
sitting. Actually, Balder stabbed himself. He
Ever
punched
prayed
Atreus'
to
chest
you?
where the mistletoe was.
Can you
But yeah,
even imagine that
Kratos
kind
is
of
just
love?
like,
No!
he's practically standing there when it first starts,
You don't care about
wanting
anything
nothing
beyond
more than for it to
yourself.
stop and kind of trying to talk Balder
Beyond
out
the
of it.
monster
And even though he
kills
knows
without
the
cause.
only thing he can do is probably to kill him, he so desperately doesn't want to go back into all of it in general. But despite all the fighting he's done to get here, his biggest mistakes and old tragedies were killing gods.
Fate
And
only
the
binds
last
you
thing
if you let
he
it.
wants is to not only start down on the path again, but bring his son over. But he's left with no choice.
And so that happens. Freya
Do what
is
is necessary.
leaves for the time being, and they finally make it
Not
to your
because it
time
is
after
written.
millions of stopping them getting there. They scatter Wolfe's ashes, but they also injure achieving not much of a secret if you know anything about
We
the whole
will
thing.
make our own destiny.
No, it's a bit of a secret because the Kratos's and Atreus's role in here are the wild cards where things greatly differ from at least every account of the stories I've heard. Not in the broadest strokes, but in the smaller ones. And it's like best twist ever. Spoiler alert for anybody who doesn't know. Feel free to go look at it and watch some of it now because boy, does it hit hard when we're looking at the prophecy and then suddenly Atreus goes, "Oh, and it looks like they called me something else here. They called me Loki." And I'm mogged out, pogged out, whatever you want to call it. I was like, "What? That's why he's been missing this whole time?"
I kind of called it, yeah, but because he played a role in killing Balder and Loki killing Balder basically signals the beginning of Ragnarok.
I was too stuck on the on all the brotherly shenanigans of Thor and Loki being brothers and that being missing
Yeah.
and me not thinking about it as a possibility until the moment it happened.
Yeah, they also uncover this prophecy that not only is Atreus Loki and part giant, as it turns out, because Orphe was a giant. Surprise.
Which I guess explains why she has such a cool storied history and had her nature magic
Yeah.
and why her axe is the coolest axe there ever was.
But giants are big on foresight and prophecy, and she had basically prophesized the entire journey of that story in advance. The little markings you see on the map that show you where to climb in the game, like in the overworld,
She
she painted those according to prophecy because she knew they would have to go that direction, which is so cool. She basically shows that Atreus is going to play a very big role as like the champion of the Jotun in Ragnarok. And also that Kratos is fated to die in Ragnarok.
And to be more specific, as they're walking away, only we, the audience, see a little broken off side panel because part of the mural was destroyed. A broken off side panel that shows Atreus holding Kratos' dying body
Oh no, Kratos sees it.
nearby it. Oh yeah, no, Kratos I think sees it out of the corner of his eye, but yeah, it's that the camera basically pans to it as they're leaving.
We fast forward a couple more years from there into Ragnarok, which opens with Freya trying to murder them for killing Balder.
And well, before that it opens with Thor showing up at their door actually, and
No,
it
I
being
think
a
I
good
think
fight.
Freya's first.
I didn't fight Freya until like a third of the way into the game.
Not when she does her like Valkyrie thing, like at very first she like jumps out of bird form and like dives them all through in a cart after Fenrir dies.
Okay. Oh man, that was so long ago. I forgot.
Everyone keeps
Yeah.
secrets.
And they basically like they arrive home from that, and like 10 minutes later,
Sometimes
Thor
it's
and
the only
Odin
way to
show
protect
up.
the ones we love.
Yeah, Thor and Odin show up at their doorstep. Odin tries to talk. Obviously, Kratos has basically nothing to say other than
I know you.
want nothing to do with your nonsense. Get off my
God
doorstep.
killer.
And Odin's like, well, see here, the thing is,
What is it you
without your
want from me?
compliance, this
Is it a god
deal's
of
not gonna
war
really
you
work.
came to
So,
find?
Thor, big guy, send him a message. And then Thor and Kratos have a little
don't really
tussle.
want war.
And despite how amazing the
Do you,
fight is, with
Kratos?
Kratos and Thor literally
that blood
clashing their
on your
ice
hands?
and thunder weapons together and
your son's
making a
hands?
frozen lightning bolt
What is
That
it
is
you
there
want
for
to
the
tell
rest
me?
of the game.
I
there
can't
for
talk
the
about
entire
it.
rest of the
But
game.
I just need you to trust me.
Unfortunately, as we only
We
get
follow your every
properly
whim.
explained to us
But you
a
don't
little
believe in
later,
any of it.
And still, I follow.
gods are partially
It's almost
primordial
madness
beings
that
and
you
get
are
their
safe.
godlike powers
that's not all
both
that
from the
matters.
faith of people,
Who's
but
keeping
really
you safe?
mostly from the lands they're attached to.
to protect
And
me.
Kratos' lands are dead, and this is
Sure
why
about
he doesn't
that?
seem that godlike
Pretender
anymore.
god!
He's literally games because he's not properly a full-fledged god in power anymore. And thus, Thor beats his ass. Because Thor was always the strongest of the gods anyway. So combine that with Kratos' missing power and more chilled out
know
of
God's
Thor eventually
In your
overtakes
lifetimes, has
his
anyone
ass. But
ever
they're not here to
worshipped
kill
you?
them. Odin's message is sent.
Ever
and he
prayed
leaves
to
after
you?
fighting Atreus to
Can you
show
even
up
imagine
and hang
that
out
kind
with
of
him and-
love? No!
Because
You don't care
the
about
gist
anything
of
beyond
I
yourself.
don't want to get too deep into like the
Beyond the
full, like,
monster
complexity of the
who
story
kills
because
without
even compared
cause.
to the first of the duology, Ragnarok is a particularly sprawling, complicated alien story. But the broad strokes are basically we have an overarching part of this story is basically Atreus is trying to figure out
Fate
what his
only
identity
binds you if you
means
let
for
it.
him, how he fits into prophecy, and basically find himself, figure out who he is. He's a teenager. That's what they do.
Yeah, in the first
Do
game,
what is
he finally
necessary.
grew up and made peace with what he is.
Not because
Now
it is
he has to
written.
figure out.
Yes. And unfortunately, in doing so, he's been going behind Kratos' back a little bit because Kratos wants to have nothing to do with it. And in doing so, eventually uncovers the prophecy that Kratos is supposed
will
to
make
die
our own
and starts
destiny.
going a little bit manic about preventing that from happening at all costs.
Yeah, meanwhile, getting talked to from Kratos constantly at all in about how like the best thing you can do with prophecies is ignore them because just as many people have made prophecies true specifically from their attempts to avoid them.
Yeah, but more of the point, I suppose, is that Kratos is desperately trying to prepare Atreus for a world without him one day and like help him grow up. But he's not doing so in the best way because he's still trying to figure out how to be a parent, and he still has his he hasn't completely gotten over his past and his regrets. He's in the process of doing it. It's a long-term thing, which I appreciate. I really like that it wasn't just the end of the game. He's better now. He still grapples with it. He's just doing better and continuing to do better. But basically, he has become entirely too overwhelming as a parent trying to control Atreus too much, and Atreus is desperately trying to keep him alive too much and is rebelling too much, and they're really struggling to find their balance. Typical, parents teenager dynamic, but with a lot of extra stakes wrapped in dialing everything up to 11. Meanwhile, Freya is on a revenge quest against the killing Boulder as a very fun parallel to the person Kratos was, which we can touch on more later as well. But the general idea of it is basically they spend a lot of the time apart in this game trying to sort their own shit. Atreus goes off on his own a lot, trying to find himself and save Kratos. But eventually, all hell breaks loose, quite literally. Bringing them back together, Atreus sort of realizes, oh, okay, I've been handling this wrong. I should be willing to talk to you and open up to you and depend on you. Which, to be fair, the secrecy is a lesson he's learned from Kratos, which is something he even says. And Kratos is like, no, I get it. I have been too pushy and too controlling and not but this hasn't been an open discussion. I've just been controlling and ordering you about because of my own fears and regrets. And
Yeah,
I
they have
pushed you
their
to
own little
this.
makeup. And I really love that moment on the way out when they have an even more because the conversation kind of has two stages. They have their quick like, oh, back together. No, it's okay, I get it. But then when they're on the way out and Atreus is like going back to Cole's like, okay, we have to do this, we have to do that, and then Kratos literally stops him and for the first time ever is just like, sit down, son, let's talk. And they have their most frank and open conversation about it all where like finally as they're talking Kratos literally has to interrupt Atreus because Atreus now that he understands him better is being so much more like he's being
Everyone
almost
keeps
too
secrets.
deferential to Kratos and Kratos finally has to actually interrupt him and say, no, I was wrong.
Sometimes it's the only way to protect the ones we love.
You've grown so much and you've had the right idea this whole time. Your moral core, these right things you want to push for.
I know you.
I should have trusted you more. I should have
God-killer.
shown you more respect and understanding.
What is it you want from
And
me?
most of the things you
Is
did
it a god
wrong,
of war you came to
did
find?
wrong because of me. But I still stand by
don't
what
really
I've
want
always
war.
said, and that's that we must
Here,
be
Kratos.
better. So let's keep
All
being
that
better
blood on your hands,
together. And then they
on your
promise, they
son's hands.
basically promise to
At
each
least
other.
you'll not tell me.
Kratos has to promise
I can't talk
that
about
he
it.
won't die.
But I just need you to trust
And
me.
Atreus
We follow your every
promises
whim.
to.
But you don't believe in any of it.
I'm actually
still
pretty
I
sure Atreus
follow.
has to promise,
Basically, the gist is that when
you
they're
are safe.
apart, they will
But that's
follow
not
each
all that
other's
matters.
advice.
which is
Who's
great
keeping
because
you
that
safe?
manifests as in future Atreus'
protect
solo
me.
sections him literally
Sure
like,
about that?
making up the voice of
Pretend
Kratos
you're
and
God.
sometimes Mimir responding to him with
For the old father!
I love
Death
Atreus'
can have me.
self-conversations here.
When it
And
burns
this is
me.
pretty Yeah, the long and short of it is effectively there's a bunch of major steps to take involved in this. There's some tragic death. There's
What do
Freya
you
getting
even
on side
know
and like reconciling
God's
the
will?
situation with Kratos.
In your
And everyone
lifetimes, has
basically coming
anyone
to the
ever
man,
worshipped
fuck
you?
Odin.
Yep.
And
Ever
they
prayed
basically
to you?
end up triggering Ragnarok.
Can you even
but
imagine
in a
that
different
kind of
way,
love?
kind of their
No.
own way.
In a
care
way,
about anything
Kratos and
beyond
Atreus were still
yourself.
pursuing peace. What,
Yeah.
what
Beyond
caught
the
me off guard,
monster
the
who
big,
kills
the
without
big
cause.
good twist that was the real sense of betrayal that made not just Kratos, but even Atreus feel like, oh, fuck it, was at the beginning of the game, the first thing Atreus wants to do more than anything is rescue Tyr from his imprisonment because they were following his
Wait,
journey.
I haven't actually
and
gotten
what it-
there yet, but I've stumbled across the book. It's just like, oh man, fuck Odin.
Yeah, they were learning what hero was his whole journey, and he kind of
what's
became
necessary.
Atreus' hero, which is funny because Tyr is
Not
the
because I'm
Norse
switching.
god of war. But at the beginning of the game, the first big quest you go on is to save Tyr from his imprisonment. And we have a reveal about 90 into the game that we don't even know
make
what's
our
up to. He
own
could still
destiny.
just be gone, but it's likely he was dead this whole time, and we never saved Tyr. It was Odin in disguise, and he's just been part-time splitting between his shenanigans in Asgard and also just living in Brock and Sindri's house, being a part of every council, listening to every single plan they've ever made and trying to manipulate them and turn them this whole time. And then he stabs my boy Brock.
Yeah.
And that's not cool because Brock's already died once.
Yeah.
And it's the worst person he could have chosen to stab because we're like, oh, could we go to the Well of Souls and maybe save Brock? And Mimir's just like, no, since he was already missing a piece of his soul, specifically the direction, his soul wouldn't have had anywhere to go or known what to do when it left his body. He doesn't even get to have an afterlife. He hasn't just been killed. He's been erased.
That's not great vibes for anyone, but especially Sindri, who
Sindri made me want to cry.
he's always been the more chill of the brothers, all things considered. That changes from that point on.
He broke harder than anyone else has broken in here. It's so sad to see someone who's been a friend to us since the beginning and become very close friends, specifically with Atreus. Completely, he blames him the same way Freya was blaming them, but there is no redemption. There is no cleaning it up. There is nothing that will make Sindri feel better or make him get over it. All he can think of is how he's been helping them and they've been taking the things he's been giving them this entire time. And now even his brother's been taken away. The only thing that really mattered to him, who he already lost once and fought to get back, is gone again. And he breaks harder than anyone else breaks. And there is no fixing him. And there's no fixing his relationship with Atreus, which I feel like is one of the last steps on Atreus's journey to maturity. Is so far, he's committed to and fixed basically every wrong thing he's really, really wanted to. And he has to learn that there are some things you can never fix. And one of those is a relationship with somebody who wants nothing to do with you anymore.
Sindri is so deeply like damaged by this that even at the end where they've defeated Odin and choose peace by imprisoning him in a little marble thing, don't worry, it makes sense if you play the game or whatever. They choose not to kill him. Sindri just smashes it with a hammer.
Not just smashes it with a hammer, uses his dwarf magic to pop out of nowhere because dwarf magic is conceptual and nobody but them can understand it. And so he literally just pops in, grabs the marble out of whoever's hand, drops it on the table, smashes it with his hammer, and then says, "There,
Everyone keeps
that's how it
secrets.
ends." And then just pops back out of existence like Goku using instant transmission in
Sometimes
Dragon
it's the
Ball.
only way to protect the ones we love.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
But that's the conclusion, more or less. Obviously, it's a lot more. There's a lot of layers, steps were missing in that, and things
God
like that.
killer.
But we're never getting into discussing the like
What is it you
mechanics of the
want from me?
storytelling if we just outline this plot.
Is it a god of
We've already
war
been here for
you
a
came to
while,
find?
because it's a long story.
It's a very long
You don't really
story.
want war.
So the first thing
Do you,
I think
Kratos?
I really want to get into
All
about
that
this
blood on your hands.
is the kind of sequel
on your
this
son's
we're
hands.
talking about here, because this could be
What is it
interesting
you
because
want
I know
to
that
tell
you
me?
and I have a
I can't talk about it,
a difference.
But I
of
just need you to
opinions
trust me.
in that you very much
We follow
believe
your every
Ragnarok,
whim.
especially
You don't believe in
the
any of it.
legacy
And still, I
Well,
follow.
I think it's both a legacy and a direct.
Because all that
really
matters
big
is
on-
that you
and
are
that's-
safe.
But that's
Here's
not
my
all that
take on
matters.
this, right?
Who's keeping you
I'll see
safe?
if you agree.
do
I
not
think we can
need
both
you
agree
to
that
protect
the
me.
duology is a direct
about
sequel
that?
to the
Pretender
that
God!
couple of things. What comes into it then is Ragnarok.
Death can have
direct
me
legacy sequel.
when it earns me.
I suggest it is not a legacy sequel, because while it is in many ways Atreus' story, Kratos
What
is
do
still
you
our
even
perspective character
know
through most
of
of the game,
God's word?
especially because it's revolved
In your
around
lifetimes, has
scenes,
anyone
side quests.
ever
She
worshipped
is
you?
for the majority of the game.
Ever
even though it's
prayed
necessary.
to you?
The open
Can you even
and it
imagine
is also
that
still
kind of
his
love?
story.
No.
It is about him being
You don't care about anything beyond
open
yourself.
communication with Atreus properly.
Beyond the
and
monster
continues to
who
build on the
kills
themes of
without
breaking
cause.
the cycle of violence that he does. All very much rooted in Kratos. But I would say that Ragnarok is kind of a transitional thing, because it feels very much like
Fate
it's setting
only
up
binds you
a
if you let
new
it.
series of games almost, where Atreus will become our primary finally Atreus next.
I think instead of a new series, it might
Do
start
what is
a
necessary.
trilogy with just the third game being Atreus.
Well, no, they've
because it is
said
written.
that the Ragnarok will be a game.
Oh, did they? Well, I guess that makes sense. It is Ragnarok.
If I had to guess, they're
We
either going to go
will make
Egypt,
our own
because
destiny.
just a couple times, or they might go and do like the Celtic side of things, because I believe Mimir might actually be Puck.
That would be very interesting. He would make a good Puck.
So that's also a possibility, I think, because Mimir is a big part of especially Ragnarok, and it deals a lot with his past regrets and things too. A lot of his stuff has been mentioned, so I wouldn't be surprised if Atreus takes the head and heads off to like Ireland or Scotland, probably Scotland since he has a Scottish accent. But yeah, that's my take on it. I do get the vibe that it is very much a direct sequel to the original trilogy, and then Ragnarok is in itself a direct sequel to 2018. But I do suspect that we're going to be getting a true legacy sequel with Atreus as our POV protagonist in a next set of God of War games because they've never said they're ending God of War, just a Nordic duology.
I definitely wouldn't try to say it's a pure legacy sequel. It's just there is too much long-standing legacy and too much carryover to old things that happened so long ago into the new generation for me to really separate it from the legacy side of things.
I think it's about
So
legacy. It's just not a legacy sequel.
it still feels like a legacy to me. I like every moment I'm playing it, I feel like I feel the descendants of everything that has happened in the past, not just in the older games, not just in the older games, but like the the family dynamics and all the everything. And I get what you mean. Story wise, it is probably more of a direct sequel.
But it's definitely very much about legacy. So I think that's where that feeling comes from.
Yes. It's definitely one of my favorite stories about legacy and with the feeling of legacy I've ever experienced. It's so good. The writing in these games is so good, but Ragnarok, especially seeing this more chilled out, more mature version of Kratos, because despite him having his problems, he is a lot better than the first game. He's talking to Atreus about more things. He's not really hiding things from him anymore. He's just still being a little bit overprotective because for one thing, he doesn't trust gods in general, and he's been told nothing but a million reasons not to trust Odin.
He's moved on from being not knowing how to be a parent at all to now having to stop being a helicopter parent,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah.
fun character progression. But you've touched on something like that I really wanted to mention about this that I really like about the Nordic duology, right? I keep writing in my notes Nordic trilogy.
Everyone
even
keeps
though there's
secrets.
We don't get to unironically use the word duology very often.
What
Sometimes
I
it's the only way
really
to protect
like
the ones we love.
this is because the original games strike me. I've never played them. I've never watched them. I've seen clips and I know references. I know the basics of the story.
I
But
know you.
The original trilogy it's like
God
mythology
killer.
to me. It's an unfamiliar.
What is it you
You
want
know
from
the
me?
broad strokes. You know who the
Is it a
major
god of
players
war
are, but
you
you don't know
can't
every
find?
story or the depths of it. But it strikes me as very much. It's about
You don't
Kratos'
really want
wrath,
war.
right? It's a revenge
Come here,
quest.
Kratos.
It has its heartfelt
All that
moments
blood
and
on your
a degree
hands,
of emotional depth to it, maybe.
your son's
But it's
hands.
very much it's all about the anger
What is
and
it you
the
will not tell me?
vengeance and bloodshed.
I can't talk about it,
Whilst
but I just need you to
the
trust me.
Nordic duology
We
by
follow your
comparison,
every whim.
takes
But you
on
don't
a
believe in
much
any
more
of it.
somber
Still, I
and
follow.
thoughtful tone.
Yeah, most of the
What matters
thoughtfulness
is
of
that
the
you are
original
safe.
games comes
that's not all that
from
matters.
retrospective in the
Who's
Norse
keeping you
games,
safe?
not when you're actually
Not me.
experiencing
You
it.
protect me.
You hit
Sure
the
about
nail
that?
on the head exactly what I was
Pretend
getting.
you're God.
I think it's really cool how this changes
Death can have
and
me.
the way it constantly
When
references
it
back
burns
to
me.
trilogy with this closure adds retroactive a lot more emotional depth to the trilogy. It makes it part of a much more grander,
What do you
longer,
even
and more
know
emotionally complex
of God's
story than
word?
just the self-destructive revenge quest.
In your lifetimes,
It
has
adds
anyone
so
ever
much more
worshipped you?
poignancy and complexity to the
Ever prayed
story.
to you?
This is
Can
it's
you
a
even
very good
imagine
example
that kind of love? No!
what we said in the first episode
You don't
of
care
this
about
cycle,
anything
this
beyond
idea
yourself.
that pretty much the first question you should
Beyond the
ask about
monster
writing a sequel or
kills
spin-off is
without
there
cause.
still more story to tell here? And the answer, as it turns out with God of War and Kratos, is definitively yes.
Yeah, easily, because in the old games, he only ever really got to be one thing, and that's a whirlwind of violence.
It
Fate
never, we
only
never got
binds
to
you if you let
explore
it.
what how that made him feel in the long-term effect of his cycle that had. And now seeing him in this role of parent,
what is necessary.
fatherhood, teaching
Not
Atreus
because it is written.
and trying not to pass on his mistakes, we get a sense of that, and it's really cool.
I also like that because I don't think
We'll
the
make
old
our
God of War
own
games
destiny.
have amazing storytelling. I think they have competent storytelling, and I'm sure they probably could have done better, but that's not what they were trying to do. They're hack and slash, puzzle solving, platformy fighters. But it is very fitting that it's, it's not just because of the types of games they were that we didn't get to explore who Kratos was, but because the life he was living in that era, Kratos didn't get to explore who he was
Yeah.
either. He had never had a moment of like stopping and self-reflection. He never had deep thoughts about who he was. There was always just another war, another fight, another quest for vengeance.
Yeah, I think some of that as well is this like marked shift in how gaming has been viewed. Like, because I mean, back in like Sega and PS1 era days, or Sega, however you want to pronounce it, there were games with strong, well-written, compelling stories, but
Oh yeah.
gameplay was always more of a focus for the most part, especially outside the realms of like JRPGs, and even they took a while to build into that sort of narrative.
Yeah, something people always used to say that like I got where it came from, but it bothered me was I heard people constantly being like, I mean, listen, I like a good story, but video games are for playing. A video game doesn't need to have a good story.
Yeah.
It needs to have good gameplay. And I'm like, well, I kind of get it, but I like my good stories. And also, if a game's not gonna have a good story, or God forbid have a bad story, then it should probably just have no story at all. Because a game doesn't have to have, if you want to go that route, a game doesn't have to have story to begin with. Don't try to tell me a story if it's bad.
Exactly. That's my feelings about it too. Is Tetris and Pac-Man, great games. They don't need a story, but if you're telling a game with a narrative, you have an obligation, I think, as a storyteller, to try and make it a good narrative, because that has become the focus of what you're trying to do. And I think there's part of the reason we have this shift between what God of War has become, what it used to be, is that the original came at a time where we were still trying to get into this idea, where games as an art form was only sort of just coming into mainstream prominence. And now in 2018, and I think 2020 is when the next one came out. We have been around for a little while. Was very much into the era where you've got these very cinematic AAA games and story-focused games, and games as an art form is a thing that is just more universally accepted. And I'm so glad because that shift is
Everyone
partially
keeps secrets.
responsible for creating this incredible sequel experience. The sequel
Sometimes
that
it's the only way to protect the ones we love.
retroactively makes the stories of the original game better, because it makes them a part of this really interesting narrative about grappling with your past
I know you.
mistakes, your regret, your legacy, and trying
God
not
killer.
to continue that cycle.
Yeah, true. It's
What is it you want from me?
it's great. This shifting in like
Is it a god of
public and
war
also
you came to find?
perspective has partially allowed this, because there have always been great writers making games.
You don't really
But
want
before
more.
they were either few
Do
and
you,
far
Kratos?
between, or they were kind of underground
All that
and
blood
more
on
or
your
less
hands,
sneaking
on your
their
son's
great
hands.
stories into games where they could. And
What is
now
it
that
you
it's
must tell me?
more accepted
talk
and
about
to
it,
a point
but I just need you to
expected
trust
instead
me.
of just something people go, well,
We
yeah,
follow
that's
your
nice.
every
It's-
whim.
But you don't believe
it's
in any
allowed
of it.
a lot
That's still
more
my
freedom
Because all that
for
matters is
like
that you are
stories,
safe.
and the
But that's
people
not all
who
that matters.
really want to write them
keeping
to
you safe?
actually get the attention
do not
and time
need you to
and
protect me.
resources to fully do
Sure
and
about that?
explore these ideas.
Pretender
And
God!
basically using
For the old
the
father!
structure of
Death
those
can have
games,
me.
they're very violent
When it burns me.
stories. Really has the fact of the deep, story that is told in the duology. Fantastic. It's not only added all the depth
No.
of Kratos, but it
God's
adds
word.
weight to what he is trying to
In your
achieve
lifetimes, has
with Kratos.
anyone ever
Not
worshipped
wanting
you?
him to live that
Ever
unnecessarily
prayed to
violent, destructive.
Can you even imagine that kind of love? No!
You don't care about anything beyond
to
yourself.
prevent her from going down the same path.
Beyond
that
the
he did.
monster
Yeah,
who
she's in a
kills
very similar
without
situation.
cause.
And they can, and it lets them bond over, and he can help her get through that. And she, as an arguably more competent parent, or at least a more open emotionally one, is able to teach him how to
Fate
actually
only
be a
binds
parent
you
to
if you let
Atreus,
it.
because as it turns out, Boulder was a lot like Atreus.
Yeah, there's that. Man, there's so many things about
Do what is
the
necessary.
story story are so good. There are so many little moments I could go into that
because
I
it is
won't,
written.
we don't have time. The journey, like ultimately, God of War as a whole, the original trilogy, and it's so good to see after 3 games and however many spin-offs, because there's plenty, of the cycle of violence being irrefutable, unstoppable, and like a self-feeding fire with infinite forest to burn through until there is nothing left at all. We finally get to see this story about living and trying to find yourself within the cycle of violence, and then finally breaking the cycle of violence and refusing to continue participating in it, no matter how much it tries to force you back in.
More than anything, I think the Nordic duology is about letting go of your regrets, but also learning from them and making the active choice to do better in the future.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments in the game is when like Atreus is almost ready to have a breakdown, and he's just like, he basically says like, I've made so many mistakes recently, and things have gotten so much worse. I don't know what to do. And Mimir and Kratos basically just say, well, you can't undo your mistakes, and you will never forget your pain, but it doesn't have to define you or continue hurting you forever either. Eventually, it's just a learning experience. What matters is that you move forward and do better.
Something they both have, we've had to learn the hard way.
The very hard way. They didn't have anyone to tell them any of this.
Amira's literally just ahead now because of learning this, how hard his road to learning this lesson has been.
Yeah, his body is still at the top of that mountain, stuck to a tree. I love the commitment to breaking the cycle of violence down to the very end. And I think it's so important because there's 2 distinct times where Kratos and Atreus make their biggest steps towards it. And that's first is when everybody's finally having the final war council before they're going to go. And Kratos literally just gives Mimir to Freya, gives her the Gjallarhorn and everything, and just says, get up, son, we're leaving. And everyone's like, what are you talking, where are you going? And Atreus is like, yeah, where are we going? And Kratos just says, home. And they walk out the door and go on their little walk, go on their little hunt, with Atreus like on the verge of crying the entire time and literally just doing everything he can to focus only on the hunt, not think about anything else, until he's literally about to shoot a deer, just like the very beginning of the last game. And this time, instead of Atreus freezing up and Kratos urging him to get it over with and get it done, Kratos puts a hand on his shoulder, stops him from shooting. And Atreus is so desperate to run away from the pain that he's just like, what are you doing? I had it that time.
The ones we love.
Kratos just says, when a wound is bleeding, you must take care of it. This is us wounded, and this is running away.
God,
this
killer.
Is trying to forget it. You can't. And
what is it you want from me?
They do that. They have
is it a god of
walk
war
and talk,
you came
and
to find?
They do decide to go back and fight, but
really
only because they have to, and because the actual cycle of violence is going to continue getting worse as long as Odin is still doing what he's doing. But it's important that they've had their walk, and they have at least broken out of their spot in the cycle of violence. And
but you don't believe in
they
any
have
of it.
finally changed to genuinely pursuing justice and not vengeance.
But that's not all that matters.
And
Who's keeping you
then
safe?
we get the actual moment where everything is going good. All the stuff has gone on.
Sure
Beaten
about that?
Odin's ass, which was many multiple stages of the boss fight. We get to see even more of the cycle of violence and see Odin's true hopelessness when finally, because Atreus is friends with Thor's daughter, and Kratos trusts Atreus so fully.
What do you even
finally
know?
Also outside the fight, great moment when Atreus is like trying
In
to
your
cry.
lifetimes,
and
has
gonna
anyone
cry, and he's
ever
literally like,
worshipped you?
Close your heart to
Ever
it. Close your
prayed
heart
to
it.
you?
Then Kratos finally
Can
grabs,
you even
does the
imagine
big
that
I was
kind
wrong,
of love?
and is like,
No!
this is what your mother wanted for you.
care
this is
about
who
anything
she
beyond
wanted you
yourself.
to be. It's who you've always
Beyond's a
been.
monster who
I was
kills
wrong.
without
Don't
cause.
close your heart. Open your heart as wide as you can. Feel their pain, accept it, and be yourself. And that's beautiful. But then we get that, all the stuff. Kratos finally talks Thor down. Odin straight up stabs him through the heart with Gungnir. And Grud gets to show up just in time to watch her father melt away just when he was about to be better, murdered by her own grandfather.
What's necessary?
And I just love the little moment
because
where
it is written.
she's about to smack the shit out of him, only for him to grab Mjolnir first and just slap it into her chest so that she goes, no, I saved her. I got her away from this. I protected
make
her.
our
That's
own
what
destiny.
I'm protecting my family. And I love the moment when they finally beat him, and the last step of breaking the cycle of violence is when they're sitting there after fighting Odin, and like Kratos actually, with no hesitation at all, stops fighting when Odin is talking to Atreus and just looks right at him and says, "This is your decision, son. Whatever decision you make, I trust you. It'll be the right one." And then Atreus decides he doesn't need to know everything. He knows enough and he can learn things the regular way, and ruins Odin's life by tossing the fucking mask that can give him infinite knowledge into the portal of infinite knowledge. So they both disappear. And I loved that. And then they finish beating his ass, and everyone else is all ready. And again, everyone defers to Atreus because everyone has finally realized that he was not the champion of the Jotnar, but he was their champion. He was the wise, kind, sweet boy that's really gotten them all here. And they leave it to him, and he's holding Odin there, and just finally is like, "You can't keep doing this. You have to stop." And he quotes his father now, but finally from his own perspective, and says, "We have to be better. You can be better." And Odin just instantly goes, "No, I can't. This is what I have to do. I've never had any choice. I have to know everything. Everything I've ever done has just been to make this happen. And you destroyed my home. You destroyed my family." And like Atreus is like, "No, you did those things. You killed your own son. You tore your family apart." And like when Odin's finally just like, "No, I can't change. This is who I am. Once you all leave, I'm just going to go right back to what I was doing." And Atreus literally just, his face cracks a little bit and he says, "Why'd you have to say that?" And then he uses the soul magic he learned earlier, because he learned about, whatever. He learned that souls can be put into special marbles the giants made. It's a whole thing. It's our explanation for why Fenrir and Jormungandr are here, even though they're not literally Loki's children.
I thought it was a really good twist on that, I thought.
I really liked it too. But yeah, and he seals Odin up, and despite the fact that Odin's soul marble still got smashed, I like that because that is the final moment where Kratos and Atreus, even if not everyone else does,
Everyone
fully
keeps
and
secrets.
finally break the cycle of violence. Even if it still exists,
Sometimes
they
it's the
no
only way to
longer
protect
have
the
a
ones
part.
we love.
And I think that's beautiful.
I agree.
Because wow, was it a journey to get there.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And it's interesting. Well, the thing I want
know
to
you.
is actually related to that, right, to an extent. Because
God killer.
I think the growth in Kratos' character
What is it you
also
want from me?
very much reflective of
Is it a god
the
of
way we've
war
changed
you
and
came
how
to find?
games have evolved in storytelling. They're very much of how society has evolved.
You don't really want
right?
war.
Because Kratos
Do you,
in
Kratos?
Nordic duology,
All that
the
blood
original
on your
trilogy,
hands,
is portraying
on your
a very
son's hands?
different brand of masculinity.
What is it you will
And
not tell me?
I don't. I
can't talk
try
about
to
it,
harp on this too
but I just
much
need you to
because,
trust me.
Everyone's
We
talking
follow you
about
on
it
every
now
whim.
anyway.
But you don't
I
believe in
think
any of it.
And
warrants
still, I
mention
follow.
that the
All
original
that matters
version
is
of
that you
Kratos
are
was
safe.
portrayed
But that's
as,
not all that matters.
Be strong,
Who's keeping you
break
safe?
stuff, be
I do
angry.
not need you to
That's the
protect
version of
me.
masculinity he wants.
Sure about that?
Be strong, break
Pretend
stuff,
I'm
be
God.
angry, be McDonald's. Hell, the old games even have fucking quick time events where you press buttons as Kratos violently bangs women off.
Did you know that?
It's all the
What do you even
toxic
know?
all of
God, what?
And
In your
the version we
lifetimes,
are
has
talking
anyone
now,
ever worshipped you?
even the older as well.
Ever prayed to you?
Him growing past that. And
Can you even imagine
has to
that
work.
kind of love? No!
perfect.
You don't care about
change.
anything
He didn't
beyond
start
yourself.
here even necessarily. But it's
Beyond
him
the
coming to terms
monster
with that and
who kills
just like a much
without
healthier
cause.
version of masculinity. This idea that he is still strong and powerful and confident, but he is also allowed to
Fate
feel
will only
things
bind
now.
you if you let it.
He is allowed to express his emotions beyond his stoicism. He's allowed to admit his mistakes, and he's allowed to solve
Do what is
problems
necessary.
with diplomacy, which I think is a really
Not because
cool
it is written.
evolution of a character.
Yeah, especially seeing how much he grows and changes, not just because he can do that, but as a result of it. It makes him not just a
We
better
make our
person,
own
it
destiny.
makes him a more complete person. And I love seeing his little moments with Faye and how much, not just how much he loved her, even with how little he said of it, but how much she loved him. And you really get to see that, like, there's a lot of stuff going on here, but once again, the most powerful force we could ever see is love. The deep, deep love between two people transformed a literal god of war, death, and destruction who destroyed an entire land, an entire pantheon, into this stoic, mostly gentle man ready for a quiet life, and then even further continued to course through him, warm him in this cold Fimbulwinter, and keep him going and give him the strength he needed to learn how to be better, both for his son and for the person who allowed him to change and allowed him to be the truest, fullest version of himself.
And in doing so, teach his son that, so his son gets a better, healthier starting point and can continue the new cycle of progression and always every generation being that little bit healthier and better.
Yeah, like, you know, it's such a short, simple sentence, but no matter what happens, it always comes back to like the simple short phrases, we have to be better, we will be better.
And if that's not God of War, the God of War sequels in a nutshell, I don't know what is.
I think that that's definitely what the sequels are all about. I mean, the cycle of violence and all that, but ultimately being better. Everyone has to be better. Not just Kratos, but everyone else important in the story. And the people we see who refuse to be better are simply ultimately left behind by everybody else or destroyed by themselves.
Because fittingly enough, these games also chose to be better in a way. I can't speak to the mechanics, although my understanding is they're also much more complex and deeper. But it's certainly a much more layered, complicated, and poignant story because they chose to focus on the narrative and the artistry. So, you know, there's a little note out there for any game makers making a narrative game. The narrative is important.
I honestly never really loved the gameplay of the old games, so it was an easy transition for me.
But on that note, you've got places to be, and I've got things to do as well, so we can probably leave that there. If you guys are listening to this on YouTube or Spotify or wherever else it appears, you can also find these episodes on my website, radfordwrites.com. You can also
Everyone
find my
keeps
other
secrets.
podcast, Fixation, there, as well as various blog articles I post
Sometimes it's
and
the only way to
stories
protect
I
the ones we
post.
love.
You can buy my books there, which I would also appreciate you guys doing, including the most recent of those, Marvel, which
I
is
know
in
you.
of itself a sequel to Domino.
God
You can,
killer.
of course, also sign up for my premium content there.
What
which
is it you want
includes
from me?
both access to Domino and
Is it a
Marvel
god
in
of
full,
war
as well
you came
as
to find?
my anthology series epilogue. And if you're Interested
don't
in
really
hearing
want
more
war.
from John, you can find him streaming
you,
on
Kratos?
YouTube and Twitch as Sepia,
All that blood on your
Sephear,
hands,
and doing plenty of other
on your
projects
son's
with
hands.
me.
That's right. Taking
What
a
is
little
it you
break
will
from
not tell me?
streaming right now while I
can't talk about it,
finish.
But I just
some
need you to
things,
trust
but
me.
Gonna go
We
full
follow
force on
your
it.
every whim.
All right.
But you don't believe in
On
any
that
of it.
note,
And still I follow.
be better, I guess. Goodbye.
All that matters is that you are safe.
What a
But that's
wonderful
not all
way
that
to
matters.
leave the audience.
Who's keeping
Telling
you
them to
safe?
be better.
I do not
Be
need
better.
you to protect me.
Do it for Kratos.
Sure about that?
Pretender God! For the old father!
Death can have me when it earns me.
What do you even know of God's word? In your lifetimes, has anyone ever worshipped you? Ever prayed to you?
Can you even imagine that kind of love? No!
You don't care about anything beyond yourself. Beyond the monster who kills without cause.